Greetings, system failure listeners. Nate here and Brian over there. How are you doing this week, Brian?
I'm pretty great. How are you?
I'm doing excellent. Obviously, we are spinning at an unusual time once again this week, because you're on your way to yet another Magic Cards tournament in Massachusetts this weekend. Have I got that right?
Yes, at ELD's Timefall Games in Bellingham. You can find yours truly slinging cardboard.
And you went to a Magic tournament this past weekend, and I have yet to debrief you on the proceedings therein. How did it go for you?
Well, I did not win. But it was pretty good. I won the first two rounds, right? And then I played against this guy, Drew, who's like a poker player, and he's like crazily good. And, I thought I had a sideboard plan for the Enchantress matchup, but it turns out that I didn't. And then I beat this other guy, Brian, on Replenish. And, he's won a bunch of tournaments is a good player. But then I lost to Mike Packer, who, top 2 to LobsterCon, also with Enchantress, which is kind of the breakout deck right now.
Yes, I know some of these words.
Yeah, so that's some detailed analysis. But really, it's a super cool tournament. There's lots of all kinds of crazy veterans. You might remember our middle brother, Jason, had his Survival of the Fittest World Championship deck, which is Brian Selden's deck.
All right, so these are Magic cards that aren't real Magic cards. They have a different background, but you can buy like really cheap versions of like... This was 20 years ago now, right?
Yeah, and the thing about the pre-modern format is they let you play with these cards because it's like a community-run format, so we can decide that. And that helps keep the barrier of entry much lower. Gold border Survivals of the Fittest are like $40 as opposed to $250 for the regular ones. So, that's kind of cool. But anyway, Brian Selden was at this tournament, and he goes to a bunch of these pre-modern tournaments. And there's other like big names from the Magic card community, like Rick Shea and others.
Well, all that sounds like a lot of fun. Did you have a good time? Did you enjoy? Even though I know you're used to going and mopping the floor with these fools, but even if you don't win, it's still possible to have a great time, eh?
Yeah. Well, this was a big tournament with a lot of good players, and the people I lost to were very good, and so that's just the way it goes sometimes. And I am newer to playing pre-modern, and my finger isn't quite on the pulse of the metagame. But yeah, it was like this Great Stories Games is like a great shop and down in Whittenville. Once you get off 495, it's kind of a bit of a scenic drive to get over there. I guess it's closer to 125, which is some bigger Massachusetts route, so it's a bit of a drive from 495. But you drive by a bunch of nice lakes and stuff. I went and got a bagel and a coffee at this bagel shop. It's like Jumbo's Donuts or something, and they import their bagels from New York. And when you go to check out, they don't ask for a tip, which is glorious. And the nice lady grilled up my bagel. I talked to her for a second. I'll tell you one thing that did drive me crazy and made me lose my hope in humanity is the driving down itself. It's just if driving on the highway is any indication, it's just that we're like effed as a society because we lack the social awareness and technology basically to use our strength in numbers basically, because people just don't stay to the right on the highway. Like the number of times someone would be going there used to be someone going like 70 in the right lane and then someone going 75 in the middle lane, and so this person's going to go 76 in the left lane, the third lane, passing this guy at 75. Well, there's a huge line of cars behind them. It's just, I just can't imagine, like, how do you not notice what you're doing? You're just gonna, because your cruise control's on 76 or whatever, you're not gonna like press the gas slightly to get by this person. You're just gonna sit there going 76.
I used to lament the lack of broad public grasp of multi-lane theory when I used to make my road trips to and up and down the East Coast from Maine to Florida back in the day. And it does seem like things have gotten a hell of a lot worse since the mid-2000s, let's say, with the advent of the cell phones and the heads-up displays and the Android Auto and the Apple CarPlay. It just seems like people are totally tuned out. Like not a lot. Like the situational awareness that was already abysmal in 2005 is even more abysmal in 2025. It really. You would think that some public awareness campaigns. This is what the Adam Carolla podcast is like. 35% of the time it's about. But like, there's all signs on the road, and they all say like, you drink and drive, you lose, and it's like, oh yeah. I mean, we've been hammered over the head with that message, but real helpful messages, or like click it or ticket's another one. It's like we could really use a public awareness campaign with respect to vacating the left lane, because it's just senseless to have one slow, unaware person clogging up the left lane, and then a huge convoy of that person's fan club, stretching out miles behind them. It's like, you got to be kidding. This is it's such a stupid problem. That's what drives me nuts about it. It's like the stupidity of the problem. So I empathize with your plight on the drive down to Massachusetts. That's a tough one.
That was rough. And then, more on brand for the podcast. I guess, I feel the shame about this whole Donald Trump and Epstein business. It's been pretty rough. Maybe 50 episodes ago, I was just trying to figure out the connection between Donald Trump and Epstein. And there's some news article about what happened between Donald Trump and Epstein, and how Epstein was kicked out of Mar-a-Lago. And, it makes it sound like Donald Trump, recognized that Epstein is a creep and is not one of these people or something, and, is above the fray somehow, even though he seems like a crazy person. There's this whole, there was QAnon, right? I mean, I was never... There's this idea that Donald Trump is throwing secret hand signals to Q, and there's this trust the plan meme and whatnot. And the QAnoners are crazy. Well, there's this dude at work who's like a brother-in-law or something. Was driving the family crazy by going on about QAnon.
Wait. A person at your work has a brother-in-law who is obsessed with QAnon. Okay, so
they were 4 or 5 years ago or something, and at every family function, he would go on about the glories of Q and these the secret Q drops and decoding their meetings and how this was important and whatnot. And so, we embrace conspiracy theory, I think, on this podcast and in general, and don't trust the elites at all. But, this idea that Donald Trump is actually going to, release the Epstein list or whatever, it really is QAnon adjacent, right? And so, we didn't follow for the QAnon, at least I didn't. But, I guess I was like, it seems like, he's probably going to do it, right? But it turns out that... he's a huge charlatan, or it's just a fraud. I just don't know how I felt. It's just so obvious in retrospect. The Mar-a-Lago reporting, it's obvious, copium or whatever. And I don't know. I don't know where we go from here. And
reports of the 2004 incident in which the Donald and Epstein had a falling out, and then Epstein was banned from Mar-a-Lago. That is a real thing. That's like seriously credible sources report on that story. And furthermore, the Donald was on Epstein's plane 7 times, but none of those were flights to the island. They were just flights up and down the East Coast, whose name isn't on that list? RFK's name is on that list of people who flew on the airplane itself. So to me, it's there's I had sorted people into 2 categories. There's the people who continued to liaison with Mr. Epstein after his 2008 arrest, and then Bill Gates, and then there's people who didn't, like the Donald. So I thought maybe there might be some chance of it does the immune response of the establishment does suggest that Donald Trump is some kind of an outsider, but I suppose the alternative view to that phenomenon is that it's all for show, and that the man is not really an outsider, and that this is all to keep the poors debating about QAnon amongst themselves at the family cookout with the brother-in-law, so that no one notices that the wealthy elite are absconding with all of our money, and wealth disparity is exploding, and you know the list, right? So I don't know. I had hope too that maybe we would be able to, maybe the Donald administration would be an outside. I said it last week. I really thought it would be way too embarrassing to now reverse course at this late hour. But apparently, whatever it is, that makes the Trump administration sell missiles to the Ukraine, do all the things they criticized Biden. It doesn't matter what figurehead we elect, right? I think it really goes to show you just how little power the office of the president really has, and that's just a boondoggle for us to play, a MacGuffin for all of us poors to play to argue over and follow like a sports team. Well, the real halls of power are elsewhere. That's the only explanation, right?
Well, I gotta think that the belief that Donald Trump is like some kind of legitimate outsider, and maybe is to some extent, but obviously not enough, had to do with like, I mean, that's pretty much why I voted for him, right?
Yes, yeah. The impression that the man is other than the political establishment, which is attacking him, viciously, like so many white blood cells attacking an infection. Yeah, that seemed convincing to me too. But we're getting foreign wars, arming of Ukraine, no end to any of these conflicts, continued support for whatever the Israelis are engaged in over there in Gaza, and no line of sight into the depraved depths of the deep state. So it is a disappointment. We maybe should learn our lesson about voting for D's or R's. So no more capitalist corporate candidates.
Well, yeah, and more tax cuts for the rich.
That's the worst of the worst. Yeah.
Well, and it's really, people are talking about this like on Breaking Points and other places, but I mean, Epstein was killed allegedly under Donald Trump's, regime there, and I don't know. It's extremely questionable where the ties end. I don't know. Like Donald Trump seems like a creep now. I'm all in on all the. I was sure that like all the rape accusations and other stuff were made up before, but now I'm back in. I'm with all the people who think that Donald Trump was a creep all along, and I think they're probably right.
Well, he's an uncouth individual. I mean, that's for sure. But I just feel like what's going on with like Bill Gates and Bill Clinton and Jeff is on a whole nother level. I still see a distinction between the creepiness of Donald Trump and the predatory nature of these other people, like the political compromise campaigns or whatever. The compromise, whatever it was that they were running down there in the U.S. Virgin Islands. That seems like a whole different beast, but maybe not. Maybe you're right.
Well, there's like, the crazy Stormy Daniels thing, and there's like these stories about Donald Trump barging into the dressing room at his Miss America pageants and whatnot. And like, what are the chances this guy isn't on board with like massages from like underage girls wrangled up by Epstein or whatever? It just seems extremely plausible.
The encounter with Miss Stormy Daniels was a consensual encounter, right? It's not as if no one's claiming any wrongdoing. What's happened is that she took a fat check to not tell anyone. They decided to tell people anyway, and now now there's like a legal battle.
Well, she is of age. Certainly that can be said.
Yeah, there's no like crime there. It's just a matter of letting the civil contract shake out in the courts. But it's not. I don't want to get caught up defending the Donald. But I did have hope that maybe we could have some kind of a renegade bull in a china shop. Even if the Donald doesn't exactly know what he's doing, at least he'd be enough of a wild card that we could shake some public awareness loose of the nefarious goings on Capitol Hill. But yeah, it seems like it matters not in the least who we vote for president. You're going to get the same foreign policy, and you won't be getting any expose onto the levers of power and the way things work in Washington. It is depressing. I agree.
Yeah, so I don't know what we're gonna do. It seems like we're pretty pretty effed as a society. Just to go back to the driving thing, like people just seem like wildly ignorant. I guess myself included. I guess I think less of people like below me on the on Elite Mountain, wherever I am, which is certainly very close to the bottom. But the people below me, I have terrible disdain for. And then, like, I don't know, like, if you like have the vision and ability to, I don't know, like, realize your vision, I don't know, you like, it's no wonder you take on like this Randian philosophy where you feel like you're the only one that matters and everyone else doesn't. And yeah, it's like a problem of like this. Well, there's just like too many people, and it's like too easy for misinformation, or well, it's too easy just for like like our cell phones and whatnot to distract us and keep us fighting amongst each other and destroying the Tower of Babel, basically. And I just don't know how we're possibly going to like overcome this.
Well, you remind me a lot of Plato, a man who lived to see the tyranny, lived to see the golden age of democracy in Athens, only to have the democracy kill his beloved master Socrates. And so he was like you. He was like, well, democracy we really thought was the future, but like it depends on the education of the electorate to a horrifying degree. And that's why Plato came out with his book, The Republic, suggesting that the only reasonable rule would be that of philosopher kings. And to hear some people say it, the proscription, the program for creating these philosopher kings to rule society is like a conundrum, or it's a contradiction, so it could never really happen. So maybe Plato's commentary is that we're all completely screwed. But you remind me of Plato, a man who was like wringing his hands and going, "What are we going to do? It's like autocracy doesn't work, democracy doesn't work. We're screwed either way." But I don't know. I think that salvation lies in abandonment of ego, as always, right? I mean, it's like whenever all the negative things that accrue to you in life are always because your ego has calcified and you're taking the costume that you wear too seriously. In a lot of ways, and I'm probably more guilty of this than you, in a lot of ways, becoming enraged at a slow left-lane camper is analogous to going to the movie theater, going to see like Scream or some horror stab movie, becoming alarmed that someone's been murdered and calling 911 to report a murder. You're like, well, you've mistaken what's going on here. You want to believe in your ego's a useful tool. It's how you know whose face to load the food in when you're sitting around the dinner table. It's critical for survival, but it's a fable and a fiction. So we should take it. You don't want to go to the Scream movie and be totally ambivalent. You want to be a little scared. You want to buy in a little bit and have a good time with it. But you don't want to buy into where you're calling the authorities, right? So that I think we just gotta. I really think the dissolution of ego, or the related revelation that reality is some kind of a ego-based illusion is, and that's Plato's big thing, right? That was he got there in the Republic by going, oh my God, what are we going to do about the democracy? He got to, well, there's a ideal realm, an eternal realm of perfect forms, and then a transient, imperfect, shadow or reflection of those forms that we live in today. So I think, and we'll get back to the illusory nature of reality in the second half of this program. I'm really looking forward to that. But that is very funny. That's very funny that. It's very funny that you are, echoing the lamentations of Plato here as a result of the Donald not releasing the Epstein list.
Well, so I mean, one thing about Socrates, right, is that he listens to his daemon or whatever, yes. And he's got like his conscience or whatever. Or I don't know if that's what it's supposed to be exactly.
Yes. Well, yeah, no, that's literally the case. He tells this is Plato, so he's puppeting Socrates. He literally tells the prosecution, like the court, the Athenian court, where he's being tried, his life is on the line. In the court, they don't want to kill him. They're like, well, yes, man, if you could just like make an apology or do one of these other things, we can totally let you off. And he was like, nope, the principle is important. I must be convicted of corrupting the minds of the youth of Athens and drink the hemlock. He told the court that whenever he wants to know if something is right or wrong, he simply consults his inner oracle, or daemon. 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 Make of it what you will.
Well, what's the relationship between your ego and your daemon?
That's a question I just love to talk about. Okay, so do you know when you get up and you go in the next room to get something, and you get there and you have forgotten the thing you got up to get? How many times?
Many times.
Yeah. And then maybe you call yourself something derogatory, or you ask yourself, well, what did I get up to get? You're like, there's this conversation going on inside your head, right? You highly relatable experience, hopefully.
Yes.
Well, the thing is that everyone's head has multiple voices in it like that. Everyone has a dialogue going on inside their head. But we only have one physical body. To make society work, we really need a 1-to-1 ratio between voices and bodies, right? It's really unhelpful. I'm looking at you, Brian, and it's not great if I have to, you have one body, but like 3 or 4 voices, let's say 6 voices, like in that movie Inside Out from Pixar, right? Remember when Phyllis from The Office is the drab, sad one? And I can't remember who the other actors are, but the Pixar movie takes place inside a little girl's head who lives in Vancouver and plays hockey. And each emotion is like a different character, like sitting around a conference table.
Lewis Black is anger. I remember that.
Oh, yeah, great. Yeah, that's right. Lewis Black is anger. Good call. Well, that's what's going on here. So in order to like navigate the world, right, in order to have some hope of knowing who's face to feed at the dinner table, we kind of have to take a tablecloth and throw it over all those voices. All the voices in your head, we're going to put one big tablecloth over that, and that's the ego, right? So that I can just, talk to that ego, and you can respond as if you're that ego. And in that way, we can organize, a multinational global society and, get resources flowing where they need to go, what have you, coordinate together, work together, battle against each other, whatever needs to happen. So that is the relationship between the inner oracle or daemon and the ego, right? The ego is a construct or a tool. It's a helpful, useful fiction. It's a costume you would wear on the stage. It's like there's the actor and then there's the costume they wear, the character they play. And that is your ego. And our society, all societies seek to reinforce that ego as much as authority wants to reinforce that ego, because that's how you control people, right? If you don't identify as you, if you don't identify as Brian, well then there's nothing if I'm the state, there's nothing I can do to threaten you, right? This is why the story of Jesus swept across the Roman Empire like wildfire. Jesus was so sure that he was not his physical body that he consented to have his body destroyed in a gruesome public spectacle. And that was a powerful statement. It's like, if you don't care about your ego, there's really not much the state can do to you. They might be able to threaten your family or something like that. And in our own time, there's this added factor where appealing to the ego is the best way to sell people junk, right? It's the best way to stimulate that credit card, buying point of sale behavior. You run that card. You can make people think that they need to keep up with the Joneses, or that they're not attractive enough, or that they're missing out, or if you can convince people that buying this product is good for your ego, then people will like helplessly go. So in that way, our society reinforces the ego to as much as it possibly can, and all of our misery comes from that. Right? Your like fear of mortality. It all arises from taking the ego too seriously.
Well, I feel like there's really like two voices, right? And I guess it's like there's like your devil voice and your angel voice. And so like when you should be going to bed or something and you like go on the Reddit or something, or the Twitters, or look at your phone, or do something besides like just reading, there's that desire, right? And then there's like the voice to do what's right. And I think like cultivating, like doing what's right and not going on Reddit's like really important, right?
Yeah.
And there's a lot of things that try to wear you down, like maybe fast food, or drugs, or the P Hub, or all manner of distraction from doing what's right?
Who among us hasn't felt the prickings of a bad conscience when they loaded up the next big booty backshots video for their queue? Yeah, it's a tough place to be.
Indeed. And so, I think there's that Bob Dylan song, right? Like, how many roads must a man walk down before he can say he's a man?
Yeah, a great anthem of the civil rights era.
Well, I mean, being a man, I guess, I think is all about doing the right thing and not conforming to your baser instincts, and that listening to the devil or whatever will give you like a bad posture and a terrible affect, like a wretched hump or something, and wear you down over time. And so I guess how does ego play into that? I guess I guess it's the things that you were just saying, but you don't really have to be like Jesus unless it's what your better half tells you to do, I suppose.
Well, we not. In what sense do you mean that? Do you mean that we shouldn't? Like, do you mean we all don't need to fling away our lives as a political demonstration? Like, you can have a healthy relationship with your ego and still not be eager to sacrifice yourself, to the jaws of the state to let them do whatever they want with your body. Or do you mean Jesus is not just the way that of his death, but like the example of his life?
I don't know. Like, just like denigrating yourself though is not like necessarily climbing the mountain, right?
Yeah. Yes.
And so, like climbing the mountain will probably put you into like a better perspective. And I don't know. Well, it's gonna make you more Randian, I think. I feel like it does to me anyway.
Climbing the mountain is going to make you more Randian. Are you telling me, like, I see, no, there is no way. I'm going to have to push back against that. The ascent to the lofty heights of virtue means, rejecting the ego, not allowing the ascent to inflame your ego.
Well, certainly.
Yeah, yes. So I think what do you mean when you say Randian then?
I don't know, like, well, I mean, like self-determination in any case. So, I mean, maybe Randian is like too hyperbolically far on the spectrum, perhaps. But, I mean, certainly you have to like rely on yourself to do the things that are right? So, I mean, who's it, like Thoreau or something? Who wrote that book about self-determination, self-reliance?
I don't know. I'm not sure of the work you're referring to.
All right. Well, yeah, it might be Thoreau. One of those classics.
There's Ralph Waldo Emerson, another one of these guys.
It could be Emerson too.
I
usually get those guys mixed up. One of those guys wrote has a line about how hanging on a quiet desperation is the English way. That might be Thoreau, and I might be getting it all mixed up here. But anyway, yeah, I don't know. Self-determination, I don't know, is key. But I mean, and certainly there's something Randian about self-determination, right?
Okay, so what do you mean by that exactly? Because like Ayn Rand is like this celebration of individualism. Like I right. That's what the Atlas Shrugged book is all about. I, as the robber baron, do not need the people that work in my factory, right? I, as the robber baron, am going to just leave society behind and start my own what have you. But obviously, right, you don't become a billionaire without absconding with the value of other people's labor and taking it for yourself, right? There's no. I mean, this seems so. It seems like the Ayn Randian philosophy seems like a carnival of ego, if you will, to me. So I'm really having trouble when you say self-determination is Randian. I'm confused. I think self-determination is good, but I see where if you were effective in your virtue and able to accomplish things, that could go to your head, right? And you could become enamored of your own sense of self. It could inflame your ego, and that would obviously be a pitfall. But I don't think that's a necessary outcome of self-determination. It's just a hazard along the way. I wouldn't define the journey of self-determination by falling into the illusion of ego.
Well, I guess I'm just kind of two minds of it all. I mean, there is the way in which, I mean, I think that the podcast revolution has had a positive influence on society, but also though, like trying to enlighten the masses seems like, trying to like splash in the ocean to like change the direction of the current or something, like splashing in a river maybe to change the direction of a current seems utterly hopeless. And so in light of that, pursuing your self-betterment is like the logical conclusion, I guess, right? Does that make sense?
Well, I mean, if you give up on everyone else, I mean, you're just going to end up... I see what you're saying, but I just think... Well, let's look to the Italian Renaissance for our inspiration. Right? The whole point is that you can see the thing, and the goal is to get other people to see the thing. So that's what like guys like the artists that's what they were doing. Yeah, Michelangelo. We said it 1,000 times in this pod. A keen observer and a consummate admirer of the male form. Michelangelo Buonarroti, a noted homosexual. I mean, and then when he just really was interested in the male form, like we're interested in the female form, presumably, except for he has got the chops to create these beautiful representations of it. And when you go look at it, you go, oh yeah, that matches, the model, the models of male attractiveness I can see in real life. In other words, I can pick up what Michelangelo was putting down back in the late 1400s, which is amazing. So yeah, that's what we have to do, right? We have to hack at the keyholes in the door between each of our chambers of consciousness, right? I'm trying, like, that's what we're doing with this podcast. I'm shouting things into the microphone, and hopefully the listener is hearing these words and realizing, yeah, I can see that some of those things, I can see that too. Hopefully we are, we have a fraction of Michelangelo's ability to show people the insides of our minds. That is what the Italian Renaissance is all about, showing other people the inside of your mind, and that's how you conquer the illusion of ego, at least in my estimation. So yeah, I mean, and it is easy to get discouraged especially when you see the things people respond to. It's like when you write code or when you write software and see how people try to use it, you're like, how can people be this dumb? And it is easy to become disillusioned. But I think that connection, in the statue of David at the Academy of Fine Arts in Florence, when I look at it, I can see through the keyhole into Michelangelo's mind, and it's absolutely incredible experience. And so I think the real problem here is that we just haven't been good enough artists on the System Failure podcast to where we could revolutionize society or get the people who hear the sound of our voices to see what's going on inside your mind and inside my mind. That is the conquest of ego, and that is where the divine project lies, eh?
Well, it'd be nice to engineer a consummately perfect podcast that would, upon listening to it, the masses would be subdued or or enlightened, or a switch would flick on.
Yeah. Yes.
And they would see the light, right?
Yeah, I mean, yes, exactly so. It is so hard to put, even the nature of the English language is so limited that everything of all the things I can experience, I can put 5%, 10% of that into English. Right? I can't English most of what I experience. There just aren't words for it. The English language doesn't have the capacity to describe it. But nonetheless, we can still stretch it, and even though it's a limited medium, just like the block of marble that Michelangelo found himself confronted with, I think, I think we got to, keep trying to say the unsayable or English the unenglishable as best as we possibly can. And I think that if you are honest, right, if you are an honest broker versus trying to this is why the podcast revolution has happened, because the media we had before was trying to not honestly make a connection, not honestly create that experience of seeing inside Michelangelo's mind. They're trying to sell you this other thing to keep political control, or to whatever is to sell products to their market, whatever the media is that you're watching. They have an ulterior motive that's not getting at the truth of the matter. And so I think that's why people abandoned the CNNs of the world and have now gone online to the podcast for all their news, because you can hear from people like us who are also struggling to English the unenglishable and relate the vicissitudes of the human experience to each other.
All right, we'll have to listen to this interview with Eric Weinstein in the second half, and then we can decide how effed we are after that, huh?
Yes, indeed. But Dr. Weinstein did sound fairly gloomy, but we're going to bring it all back around at the end. So hold on to your hats, folks. We're going to hear some serious prognostications of doom from the smartest person I know right after this. And we're back. All right. Well, during the break, we had a chance to try to track down some of the loose ends from the first half. Brian, what'd you come up with?
Yeah, so Self-Reliance is by Ralph Waldo Emerson, and it is one of his most famous essays, first published in 1841, in which he argues for individual intuition, nonconformity, and trusting oneself, rather than adhering blindly to social expectations or tradition. Trust thyself, every heart vibrates to that iron string.
Yeah, that sounds like a very 20th century viewpoint, very modern viewpoint to me.
Well, to me, I think that I guess really encapsulates the challenge of being. But see, I guess would you say the challenge to being is paying student loan debt, or what?
Well, that certainly is my top level challenge. The challenge to see, I half agree with Emerson here. I think you have to. It's like art. Art has to be somewhat derivative, or it'll be utterly incomprehensible. It has to be made of past pieces. Like when it comes time for Lana Del Rey to put out an album, she references the big hair, the Marilyn Monroe, 1950s and 60s era. And so, but art also has to be novel too. It has to be equal parts derivative and novel. Otherwise, it'll be a boring rehash. Like another one of these crazy Superman movies, or we've had a lot of Star Wars and a lot of superheroes, and it's just becoming it's not novel. There's not enough novelty there. So there's a careful balancing act in art between derivation and novelty. And similarly, there's a careful balancing act to be performed between reject between self-determination, maybe between forging your own path, between thinking things through yourself, and relying on tradition. Tradition isn't just worthless like I thought for most of my life, right? The books of the Bible, right? They don't make a whole lot of sense, especially when you're younger. But as you get older, you start to see, well, these are all, these are layers of meaning, layers of metaphor. A story, we're talking about archetypes now, right? Like a story, an archetypical story that only relates to the life of you or me is just a biography. I mean, boring. But a story that relates to everyone's life simultaneously, it's going to be abstract. It can't be literal, but it's like a key that opens many locks. It's like it's valuable in that way. And so I just think that if there is a Darwinian marketplace of ideas over history, right? The ideas that are meaningless or useless or people don't find compelling get forgotten, but the ideas that people find relevant to their lives get recycled and taught to the next generation, and the next generation, and the next generation. And so you end up with some really old pieces of literature. Well, the fact that they're battle-tested through millennia gives them some kind of value, right? Some kind of, you wouldn't want to only live your life with reference to old traditions. Right? We have to move forward too. But I think, navigating by reference to where you've been as well as where you're going is super important.
Maybe relatedly here, but I just want to say one more thing about Magic the Gathering.
All right, hit us.
And that is, you'll see good Magic the Gathering players doing this when they're streaming. You do when you're playing, but when you're streaming, you're thinking about your decisions out loud.
So you'd be streaming an electronic game, right, versus sitting at a card table.
Yeah, like playing like Magic Online and talking, negotiating your way through the complicated decision trees and whatnot. And one thing you'll see players do is ask themselves, like, what am I supposed to do here, right? And so, like, there's this guy Brian Cook who plays combo decks, which are very complicated, and if you do it right, you can win very quickly, and your opponent, won't be able to do anything basically. But you kind of have to thread the needle very correctly, and he'll be asking himself, like, what am I supposed to do here? He'll be trying to like embody like the archetype of the combo player and kind of like realize the vision of the combo deck. And so when negotiating life's challenges, like it's this question of like, well, what am I supposed to do here? Like, how do I like embody the archetype of like a self-actualized individual, or how do I realize God's vision, or how do I that's like the question to ask yourself, like, what am I supposed to do here? Like that's like the question, right?
Yeah, supposed to. Yeah, that's religion's kind of like that. Like, what's the thing with magic cards? You might be defeated, right? It's like Sun Tzu says, the battles, the defeat and victory are decided before the battle. So it might be that there's nothing you can do. But there's like a through line of moral rectitude in life, and even though they're really hard to do, if you do the things your inner daemon or oracle tells you to do, I think you can expect good things. Is that reasonable to postulate?
Yeah. Well, like this Brian Cook, he's like the best like storm combo player pretty much that there is, and he's been playing the deck like a long time and is like crazily good. He's been playing it for like decades at this point, and he still has to like ask himself this question and sort out like what it is the options are. It's not just like he doesn't just know what to do. He has to try to like realize the archetype and ponder like what it means, and then execute that vision. And that's generally speaking how you negotiate your way through complex situations, right? And so I don't know, like trying to like realize like what am I supposed to, like what is the angelic, or what is God's vision here, I guess, is the simplest way I can put it, I suppose.
Yeah. Well, in your channeling an archetype, the way to realize that vision is to channel an archetype. It's interesting. It used to be the theophagia, the god-eating ceremonies, the Greco-Roman world, where you would go to the woods and you would drink the wine of Dionysus and you would become Dionysus, right? You would become. They called it. That's where the word enthusiasm comes from. You would become you would become the god. The Greeks and Romans conceptualized a pantheon of gods who were all archetypes. Here's the goddess of love. Here's the god of war. And you would channel these gods depending on what you needed in your life. It's really interesting. The old pantheon. When you start thinking about archetypes, the old pantheon starts making a lot more sense than the crazy stories of Greek mythology, as I understood them when I was younger.
All right. Well, anyway, what podcast clips have you got chopped us for us this week, Nate?
Well, the one of the biggest podcasts in all the land is this Diary of a CEO. It's got this this lad Stephen Bartlett. He's half British, half South African, or half English, half South African. I'm not quite sure. Like, there was a time when South Africa was part of the Commonwealth. Not really sure how you would describe that particular, genetic makeup. But super sharp dude. Always enjoy his podcast. And he had my favorite commentator in all of the land, all the podcast realms, on this past week. Dr. Eric Weinstein is a physicist, and he has a long list of credentials that don't need to be repeated here. But he is the smartest person that I can still understand. About 75-80% of the time, I'm right on board with what Weinstein's saying. And the other 20% of the time, like, let's just say I got no idea what this man's talking about, and leave it at that.
Well, he's kind of like an obstinate guest, right? He doesn't just like answer the questions; he'll respond to the questions with questions, and he's obviously trying to like advance the narrative.
Yeah, highly disagreeable, like high in trait disagreeability, but that makes him a good interview. And you're right; he never answers the actual question the interviewer has put to him. But he always thinks of something interesting to say. So for that, I love it when Dr. Weinstein comes on. Now, I've got 6 clips here. The first 2 will be roughly themed the decline of society, lamented earlier by Brian, sitting in the left-hand lane, staring at the back of someone's car, reading all their bumper stickers. So the first 2 are the doom and gloom, beating the drums of the apocalypse or what have you. The second 2 clips will be focused on, Platonism, dimensionality, and consciousness. And the last 2 clips will be more focused on the fake reality we find ourselves confronted with here in the Jeffrey Epstein 2025. Naturally, Mr. Epstein's name will be coming up prominently towards the end here. So I suppose I should just introduce the first clip here, Brian.
I just have to say one more thing about the traffic conundrum, because it's not just me like going like looking at this guy's bumper sticker that is like the issue. Like, this is what causes traffic jams, right? You get like a line of cars backed up in the left lane.
Oh, it's a major safety issue.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, this is like how congestion happens. Yeah. And so inevitably everyone has to throw on their brakes to stop for the person in front of them. And now like the whole highway is gummed up and we're all going like 30 or whatever.
Yeah. Yes. There's a lag. The person in front of you hits their brakes. Even if you're Johnny on the spot, it's going to take you at a bare minimum 1/8 of a second to put on your brakes. Guy behind you the same, so now you're up to a quarter, 1/4 of a second, and you just get enough cars doing that, and someone eventually has to come to a stop.
Yeah, so this minor lack of awareness like gums up the whole highway for people leaving Maine, basically headed south after the weekend or whatever.
It's a great tragedy of the commons, maybe the most preeminent example in our modern culture, eh?
All right. Anyway, sorry. Back to Weinstein.
Okay. Well, I think we can just go ahead and I'll just introduce clip number 1 by saying in this clip, Dr. Weinstein opines on a strange and peculiar stagnation in the realm of physics. Take it away.
We've got some time left here, though, no?
Well, we did. If you looked what's happened in the last month, it's coming undone. Pakistan and India.
Do you really think this is the start of the end?
I have no idea where I am. Of course it is. The World War II order was it's like control rods keeping the world from going supercritical.
Can't we just put the rods back together?
Have you looked at we had an election with Donald Trump versus Kamala Harris in the U.S. Tell me what's going on in the UK. What are we doing in the mayoral race for New York? I don't know if you're watching what I'm watching. Look at the mess that's going on in Gaza. Russia is nuclear. Israel is presumably nuclear. Pakistan and India are nuclear. The U.S. is nuclear. Iran is almost nuclear. China's pissed off about Iran because it was trying to make a play through the region. North Korea is watching. Oh, and look at the UK in turmoil. UK is a very nuclear country, to say nothing of France. This is not going to go well. And by the way, look at how much is happening with AI, right? Everything was really stagnant. So I have this famous challenge that I give people, which is go into a room and subtract the screens and forget about style. How do you know you're not in 1973? Like, drones are the beginning. Imagine I needed a refill on my coffee and you did something and a drone brought me a coffee to not interrupt the flow. We know we weren't in 73, but in general, drones aren't a big part of our lives. These robots, I've never seen a humanoid robot actually doing anything other than on YouTube, where it's like doing the mashed potato.
Mm-hmm.
So in general, yeah, things were just really stagnant for a really long time. And during that period of stagnation, we had this crazy narrative, which is like the dizzying pace of change is making it almost impossible to keep up, while things were incredibly stagnant. And so it just shows you sort of this weird way in which our minds can be programmed to completely ignore what we're experiencing.
Okay, well, we'll just plant a little flag in the physics stagnation comment there, because we're going to come back to that at the very end. But Dr. Weinstein, he seems very doom and gloom. He's watching these Westphalian nation states just behave in a preposterous fashion. And it's almost like they don't have any other way to. There's some kind of, it's like a runaway train. There's some kind of momentum that means that Donald Trump can criticize arming the Ukraine and talk about America first all during his campaign. But when he gets into office, it's going to be foreign wars and it's going to be arming Ukraine. It's going to be the same program. Like there's some kind of a invisible momentum, or I guess I should say, momentum. There's some invisible momentum that we're not party to that's driving the actions of these Westphalian nation states. I guess we should use that to segue into clip number 2, in which Dr. Weinstein opines that World War III has already begun.
My people just got hit. And you want to talk about the river and the sea. That river is not the Jordan River, and that sea is not the Mediterranean. The Arab world stretches from the Atlantic with Morocco right up to the, Shad al-Arabia waterway that divides Iraq from Iran. And I don't think this is stable. There is no way in which we should be fighting like this. This is ridiculous. Trump used the F word. I mean, he's taking a ton of crap. Why would you use the F word? Well, isn't it interesting that people view Trump as so tacky? He's got this Queen's sort of bluster. He doesn't reek of finalist clubs at Harvard or Skull and Bones or whatever. No, Trump doesn't use the F word for a reason. That he needs it once in a blue moon, and it better mean something. And he said this to Iran, and he said this to Israel. These two countries have been fighting for so long. They don't know what the fuck they're doing. He didn't make a mistake. The rest of the world has just forgotten how to calibrate. What do you see Trump in? How is he clothed? He's almost always in a suit and tie. And he almost never says the F word. And it's carefully calibrated to get everybody's attention, and we're so asleep that we don't even hear it. This is World War III, and it's already started.
Well, there you have it. A fairly grim diagnosis, if ever I've heard one. And, Weinstein's comments there make me think of, you could really think of World War I and World War II as one continuous conflict. We in the United States think of, 18 to 41 being the interlude in between those two wars. But really, the conflict in Europe started in 39. And even between 18 and 39, this fighting never stopped in Manchuria and in Spain. It kept on going. So I don't know. You could almost draw a continuity through World War I and II and the Cold War, and now this looming World War III that Dr. Eric Weinstein sees on the horizon. And here I'm going to bring in another one of my favorite personalities, the good old Dr. Michael Hudson, one time and hopefully future guest on this delightful pod. He has this analysis where World War I was really a conflict between finance capital, as represented by the London Stock Exchange, and industrial capital, as represented by the German Empire, which the great theme of the London Stock Exchange is to get in and get out and take your profit quickly. A lot just like America, we have that same sort of day trader mentality. Whereas the German version of capitalism has a lot more. They would seat bankers on their actual boards of directors. There was a much more. There was, rather than industrial capital being made subservient to finance capital, you would have a much more equal partnership. And of course, the great conspiracy theory. You mentioned conspiracy theories at the outset of this episode, Brian, and I haven't been able to come across any reputable sources. But the way that World War I started was with the assassination of the heir to the Austrian throne, the Archduke Franz Ferdinand, on the streets of Sarajevo by a Serbian nationalist. And of course, the Serbs were themselves subject of the Austrian Empire, and they wanted to be independent of the Austrian Empire, and so that's why you have this act of terrorism, the Black Hand. And the thing that, as a result of this the geographical location of the Balkans is highly suspect here, because the Germans were busy building a railroad from Baghdad to Berlin, and that railroad was interrupted by the outbreak of World War I and never completed. Had it been completed, it would have completely destroyed the British Empire. They would have lost their vast shipping empire. Remember, the Britain ruled the oceans, and they were the promulgators of this massive worldwide shipping empire that would go around the Horn of Africa at first, then after 1888 through the Suez Canal. But all that would be obviated if the Germans could just move oil from the Middle East into mainland Europe without using shipping. Who knows how true that is? But whatever happened, the Brits and the Germans fought two brutal wars. Americans on the Britain's side in both of them, or maybe it was one big giant war. And then that went right into the Cold War, where capitalism now has to confront communism in the guise of the Soviet Union. The Soviet Union collapsed under massive pressure in 1989. The Berlin Wall falls in 91, and then we have a brief interlude, just like we did from 18 to 39 or 18 to 41. And then things start to the dominoes start to tumble one after another again. So all I'm saying is I can definitely see where Weinstein's coming from here. The outlook looks, rather than being stable like it has been for our entire lives and the lives of our parents, things are now looking not so stable. And it's
the idea of that Baghdad-Berlin railway is that the London-centric interests were supporting terrorism, basically.
That's it,
which is what resulted in the assassination of the Archbishop there.
That's the conspiracy.
It just seems eminently plausible. I mean, that's pretty much what we do now in the Middle East. Support one faction against the other faction.
It does seem like a story we may have heard one or two times since, which lends even more credence to this wild conspiracy theory.
Just the geopolitical importance of oil just cannot be overstated, and we're still skirmishing over the Middle East basically for the same reasons, right?
Yeah. Well, look, 1953, Operation Ajax. We overthrow Mohammad Mossadegh, the Prime Minister of Iran, and install the Shah. Of course, that has ramifications that are ringing in all of our ears today. So,
well, supposing we are in World War III, right? You still have your global industrial capitalists against the people, I guess, everyone else.
Well, I think that after World War I, the industrial side was subjugated to finance to the point where the Germans had to pay a ridiculous debt, right? The Treaty of Versailles. And it destroyed their economy. They had to dump all of these German Reichsmarks onto the international currency markets, and it blew out their inflation rate. And that just led right into World War II. So I think that the forces of finance capital emerged victorious and instantly pivoted to now attacking the communism. Communism in the twin guises of Red China and the Soviet Union. It was absolutely wild stuff. And it's a nuclear conflict now. ended World War II by bringing down the fire that burns at the heart of the sun on non-military civilian Japanese targets and terror bombing with them with atomic bombs, and that ended the war and led to a Cold War stalemate that lasted some 50, 60 years, something like that. And here we are.
As a means of like posturing against Russia for the coming Cold War, basically.
Yeah.
Is
Yes.
the theory.
Yeah. Yes. What people don't know is that in August of 45, that Stalin was poised to invade. He had moved all these armored divisions onto the Kamchatka Peninsula and was poised to invade the Japanese island of Hokkaido to the north of the mainland, where the Americans were operating. And so we had to end that war quickly before the Russians got involved in Japan. And so that's you can in case I sound too crazy or conspiratorial, no less August light than 5-star general and future president of the United States Dwight D. Eisenhower strongly disagreed with the terror bombing of civilian populations to end the war. The Japanese ability to make war had been completely compromised at that point, and you're just talking about diplomatic flourishes. So I don't know. Yeah, it's quite a tale. So here we are. Now we've got Russia and Ukraine, we've got Israel and Gaza, and we've got the Americans behind the scenes supplying arms to one side of these conflicts the whole way. So yeah, that's how you end up in a world war situation, and it's unfathomable. But I think I said this last week, but maybe it's just the logic of these Westphalian nation states. Like maybe this is just I associate Westphalian nation states with the modern capitalist paradigm, right? The Peace of Westphalia was 1648. It established international borders. It was the final culmination of the Protestant Revolution. The idea is we don't want the Pope to be able to cross borders and tell people in foreign lands what religion they have to be. The right of religious self-determination is going to be guaranteed to each one of these sovereign lands, and now you have this whole idea where the whole world, not Antarctica, is whacked up. Every plot of land is someone's country. I think it's there's like this little patch of island out in the North Atlantic, and I think it's like maybe like the Canadians and like the Norwegians. There's two navies there's like a disputed island, and one navy will come and put their flag and leave a bottle of their finest liquor, and then the other navy will come and remove that flag as a fun joke, and put their finest bottle of liquor as compliments, and they go back and forth, over this little rocky island in the middle of nowhere. But it shows you the logic that it's a rocky. The rock has poked above the surface of the ocean. It must belong to somebody's country, right? That's a modern Westphalian mindset, and it's related to the rise of capitalism and the rise of the Industrial Revolution. So I would expect that when the capitalist system seizes up and stops working, like all economic systems must eventually, that the part of the destruction will be of the Westphalian modern concept of the nation state.
But so you're saying that finance capital has basically conquered almost every country in the world at this point.
Yes.
And so it's like this global war between finance capital and the proletariat.
Yeah, the problem is that finance capital is inherently unstable. It is not. It cannot replicate itself into the future for long. The logic of fractional reserve lending and compound interest, right? The proliferation of central banks, all of these things, right? Our national debt, which is really the amount of money in circulation, right? The money that the government distributed and then didn't take back in and didn't tax back out of the economy in taxes. Well, that's the national debt, and we denominate our national debt. We denominate the difference between dollars issued and dollars taxed back as a debt, and then pay interest to the already wealthy when we have a perfectly good money printer. There's no reason we need their money other than those people love getting paid interest. They would really rather not be taxed. They would much rather hand over their money temporarily and get it back plus interest. It's a much better deal for them, but it stokes wealth inequality, A, and then B, you end up with a situation where now we're paying them so much interest on this national debt that the interest costs more than our national defense. So at a certain point, we're going to have to say, guys, we realize that the rules of the game that you've written declare that this hockey game is 5,000 to nothing, but none of the players have any motivation to continue playing when it's 5,000 to nothing. We need to not have a winner-take-all Super Bowl, and instead, like the NHL, the Stanley Cup Finals, have a series of games. Periodically reset the scoreboard so that everyone has an incentive to keep playing.
Well, it seems like what the finance capital sector wants to do at this point is basically like crash the whole system and then escape.
Yeah,
somehow.
Maybe so. They know it's unsustainable, right? The upper echelons of finance they're aware that debts need to be forgiven periodically because they get their debts forgiven with regularity, right? It's like, your PPP loans are all forgiven, or here's some bailouts. Whoops, you screwed up the entire economy in 2008. Well, here's some bailouts so that you don't become insolvent, right? Everyone knows. Those people know that forgivenesses are definitely needed, but it's just they don't want any forgivenesses for regular Joes like me or like thee, because that's not good for their bottom line. Whereas them getting forgiveness is great for their bottom line. Feel like we're getting off track a little bit here, but yeah.
Just further down that line of inquiry. The price of Bitcoin, is pushing 120K now.
Yeah, it popped over 120K, unless my eyes deceive me.
I think it's back at 117 now.
Yeah, I saw that it briefly collared up and back down, but
just the value of like the dollar is like completely destroyed, and it's going to be further destroyed. I would have to imagine that's what the big beautiful bill will do, which is why people are realizing it's a good time to be buying Bitcoin. But yeah, it's just going to be, I don't know, it's just going to be impossible to accrue wealth. At least, it's not like that hyperinflation, but it is like super inflation though, and you just can't afford to have dollars sitting in your checking account, right? You need to like be buying Bitcoin, right?
Put it in the stock market. It's got to do something, because you're going to be losing money if you just sit on it
aggressively. So
yeah,
and so yeah, it's a brutal time to be one of the poors.
Yeah, that's usually the thing. That's usually a feature of the Twilight of Empires. It's a brutal time to be a poor. Usually, that's what it means to have a system that's no longer sustainable into the future. Oof, yeah. Okay. Well, that's a lot of doom and gloom to get started here. But now we're going to get into a little bit of physics, and I do have to just paint a picture for you, because in this section, Dr. Weinstein is going to take 3 coffee mugs, or more accurately, a French press and 2 coffee mugs, and arrange them in a triangle on the desk. And he's going to hover, 6 inches, 12 inches above those 3 vessels on the table in front of him. You're sitting in front. Stephen Bartlett, the interviewer, and Dr. Eric Weinstein, the interviewee, are sitting at a card table. And so he's holding this coaster to create a tetrahedron, right? Not a square-based pyramid like the Great Pyramid of Khufu in Giza, but a pyramid that has 4 triangular faces, right? So the base is a triangle versus a square.
It's like a cube, but triangles.
Yes, yeah, very similar idea. Yeah. So it's the tetrahedron is one of the Platonic solids, like a cube is. And amazingly, you will not hear Weinstein get into Platonism here. I cannot believe this man has not made the connection, right? A lot of times Plato is a lot of times Plato is rendered as an old man with a flowing white beard, and he's holding like a wire-frame dodecahedron because the man was obsessed with Platonic solids. Like, to him, the strange coincidences, the strange math of faces and edges and vertices was so bizarre to him, it betrayed the fact that there's some larger reality that Plato speculated about in his book, The Republic. So we'll hear Dr. Weinstein. He won't be mentioning Platonism, but just listen to this little excerpt.
I was reading through some of your work, and I came across this sentence that said you'd kept a secret for 30 years in terms of your belief about the nature of the reality that we live in, and that you thought maybe it was more than just the dimensions we experience. Maybe there was 14 dimensions. I wonder this a lot, because we're fixated on problems. We're fixated on what we see and what we hear and what we feel. But I wonder sometimes if even that is an illusion. I've spent a lot of time actually thinking recently about the simulation theory, and is this whole reality just some simulation on some kid's video game in another dimension? So I thought, you're a physicist.
Do me a favor. Put that in a triangle pattern here. Okay, so we have 3 mugs. Think of those as vertices of a tetrahedron, and think of this coaster floating here as the 4th vertex.
Mm-hmm.
For every 2 vertices, so the number of vertices we would agree is 4.
Yeah. What does vertice mean?
Points.
Yeah. 1, 2, 3, 4.
Idealize these 3 things and this as points.
Mm-hmm.
Draw a line segment between all of these 4 vertices. How many line segments are there?
1, 2, 3, 4, 6. 6?
Yep. So there's 6 edges, 4 vertices. How many triangular faces that have 3 vertices on them?
Oh, 4.
Yeah. This is how to think about the actual dimensions that we have open to us. The 4 faces we know about. The key point that I was trying to get at is, I don't believe that you just have the 4 dimensions. I believe that you have all 6 edges are dimensions, and all 4 vertices are also dimensions. I'm talking about a hidden world.
Well, there you have it. Plato, in his The Republic, talking about what kind of training would a potential philosopher king have to go through so that society could trust them with the maintenance, care, and running of society. What kind of ordeal would they have to, what would make a perfect ruler, since democracy is putting Socrates to death, and since despotism or absolute monarchy or autocracy is a total disaster, the entire society revolves around the ego of one person. What do you do? Well, part of his conception was that this person would be, he described this person taking a journey from being chained in a cave, right, peering at shadows, like a shadow puppet play on a wall, taking a look around, chained up beside people so that your face can only move forward. But this man somehow becomes unchained, takes a look around, realizes that what he and his fellows have hitherto mistaken for reality is actually a shadow puppet show put on by unseen figures standing before a fire behind them. And then he rejects the chains and he claws his way out into the upwards towards the divine light that exists outside the cave. The shining sun is the allegory here, or the analogy. So just keep that in mind. Maybe I'll just bring home the dimensionality piece, right? When you think about your shadow on a sidewalk, right, you're talking about a 2-dimensional slice of your 3-dimensional body, right? There is a shadow is a perfect analog because a shadow is a 2-dimensional slice of a 3D object, right? Plato, before anyone used a word like dimension, is here implicating dimensionality, just as Dr. Weinstein is doing. So let's lock and load that and unless you've got comment, Brian, we'll go on to the next clip.
Well, I mean, do you think that is Weinstein saying that our perception, which is mainly, we think about our perception, typically I think it's like 3-dimensional. And so are we like on a face of the tetrahedron, which would have, 3 sides to it, but then a bunch of points too, and then of course the other 3 sides of the tetrahedron, and then of course the many edges and whatnot. I mean, do you have any sense there as to what
are we on a face?
Like where does it? Yeah, our perception of dimensions land on that tetrahedron.
So Weinstein is suggesting that the vertices and the edges are also dimensions,
right?
That we just perceive them as, because we're trapped in a lower order shadow of a higher order reality. We see, if you looked at, do you remember in that movie Interstellar when they're talking about a black hole? What is a black hole going to look like because it's an extra dimensional object? What's it going to look like to a person who's stuck in 4 space like you or me, right? And what was the analogy? I guess it would look like a sphere because it's a extra dimensional circle. Isn't that what they say in Interstellar? Like the black hole looks like the wormhole looks like a sphere instead of a circle because it's extra dimensional, or because it's a long tube we can only see one slice of, or something like that. I can't quite remember how they put it in the movie, but yeah, we can only see 4 of the 14 dimensions. We can only experience 4 of the 14 dimensions. Those are 3 spatial dimensions and 1 temporal dimension. You've got 3 rulers with protractors to measure the angles between them, and then you've got a stopwatch. And but really, there's Weinstein in the next clip will suggest that maybe there's multiple temporal dimensions. So I don't know. Maybe we could play the next clip and see if we can figure out where we exist in Weinstein's map of reality from that.
And the simple way to understand this theory is that there's dimensions that exist beyond the ones that we know.
We already know from Einstein that these dimensions are implicitly in Einstein's theory. Every single dimension that I'm talking about is being constructed out of the 4 that we began with. When I put the cups here and the coaster, the edges were calculated from the vertices, and the faces were calculated from the edges. Mm-hmm. My point being, these dimensions are already here. And because the dimensions are already here, they were already present in Einstein's theory all along. When you ask for what Einstein's real equation is, we actually don't think about it that way. We call it the Einstein field equations, plural. How many of them are there? 10. Why are there 10? Because there are 6 edges and 4 vertices that weren't accounted for. They're already in Einstein's theory. We just didn't take them seriously as directions you could go in.
You've heard about the simulation theory, haven't you?
Why? I don't want to talk about it.
Really?
Well, again, it's the LLM problem. The really interesting thing comes from, I don't know, and maybe the cosmos is traversable. Maybe times travel replaces time travel. You see, if I flip all of the dimensions of time and space, so I have 1 of time, 3 of space in Einstein's theory. Okay? The time dimension gets a minus sign. The 3 spatial dimensions get a plus sign.
And the 3 spatial dimensions are?
X, Y, and Z.
Yeah.
Z, forgive me.
Which is, for a simple person...
Depth, width, and height.
Yeah, you can go like forward, backwards, up, down.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, so we have 3 dimensions there, and then we have 1 of time because the conversation takes place over time. You're moving around. Now, flip the time dimension to being plus when it was minus before, and all the plus dimensions to being minus. So now I have 3 time dimensions and 1 space dimension. It would look exactly the same. The 1 space dimension would take the function of time, and the 3 time dimensions would have the function of space. We don't even teach people the idea that there is not necessarily an arrow of time if time is not one-dimensional. The only dimension that has an arrow is 1. If something has 1 dimension, you can say, and I tried to do this on Rogan. I said, if you have a cassette tape and you want to go back to an earlier song, again, your younger listeners will have no idea what we're talking about, you have to go back through all of the songs before. But if you have a stylus on a turntable, some of them will be hipsters with vinyl in their own homes, you can lift the stylus up and it doesn't need to go back and unplay each song in reverse. Mm-hmm. Okay. You may be able to go back in time without going back through time.
Well, I guess he's saying that all the dimensions are here in any case.
What is it that the bard wrote in The Tempest? Hell is empty, all the devils are here. I like that line. That's a good line. Well, here's how I would just like there's something about the way Weinstein's brain works that is really hard to grok. Man, you can just see that he sees it, but the way he talks about things isn't quite the way the analogy I like to use is Peter Pan, who has a shadow that's independent of him, right? I mean, you remember in the Peter Pan, like I think it's Wendy, Wendy wakes up to this kid chasing his own shadow around her nursery or whatever, and she has to sew his shadow back onto him and stuff.
Indeed.
So imagine that you had a shadow like that, Brian. You were walking down the sidewalk, but your shadow is it wants to. It's its own thing. It doesn't mirror your movements anymore, and you want to hand him a 3-dimensional apple, right? But Shadow Brian is flatter than a pancake. He has got no thickness at all, only length and width, and that's it. So the only way when he's going to be able to, well, let me Socratic you a little bit. What is your spherical apple going to look like to Shadow Brian?
We'd have to hand him a shadow of your apple. Seems like the only way to do it.
Just suppose you were looking to suppose we're going to go trans-dimensional here, and you're going to actually hand him a 3D apple instead of the usual 2D apples he's used to eating. He's going to see a circle, right?
Yeah, a slice of the apple.
Yeah, he can only because he's got no thickness. He's got only length and width. He can only grok one spherical slice of it. Remember in kindergarten or in a nursery school, you'd slice the apple in half and put on a stamp pad and then stamp the page and create this, you get that little star from where the seeds are in the middle. That's how your shadow self has to understand that the apple is not a sphere, that the apple is not a circle, that the apple is a sphere. In order to have that, well, your Shadow Brian is going to have to look at a whole bunch of MRI slices of that apple to realize, oh, I see the diameter of the sphere is growing, the radius of the sphere is growing with each slice and then decreasing again with each slice. So, I see here that this series of circles really represents a sphere, right? Does that making sense so far?
Yes.
Well, look, we should be, so that's the sequence of slices, right? That is how you know that you are at or near the bottom of a dimensionality well, right? If you are seeing slices, well, that gives it away. That tells you that there is a higher dimension that you cannot perceive, right? That you have to perceive one slice at a time because your pop-up book in your brain, your model simulating software in your brain is limited to a measly 4 dimensions, right? Well, if that's the case, that means that the temporal dimension, right, the temporal dimension is similar to a physical dimension. Right? I could tell you that it's 90 minutes to Boston, or I could tell you it's 150 miles to Boston. Right? These are 2 ways of relaying the exact same measurement. Yeah. So, if that's the case, that means that your childhood and your old age exist in some epistemological sense, right? In the same way that Shadow Brian's apple, the top and bottom of the apple exist in some epistemological sense, even when Shadow Brian can only see, only experience, only grok the middle slice, right, with a star in it, where the seeds are. Right? It just means that we're just not. It just means that they're hidden, right? In other words, your youth and your dotage are hidden around a corner of time. It is a matter of geometry, the sacred geometry of which our main man Plato wrote so much about. Well, if that's the case, well then also all of your ancestors are lined up behind you. They all still exist in some sense, right? It's just not, we're just not in that slice of reality right now, but that slice of reality still exists. It's occluded from us only because of our limited monkey brains. We have a length, a width, and a height. Each of these is at 90-degree angles to the other. And just because we cannot cram another 90-degree orthogonal angle into that X, Y, and Z space, well, that's why we have to get out the stopwatch and start experiencing things as slices, right? Because there's a much broader reality than the 4 dimensions we're stuck inside of. And, it really, your sense of ego, your sense of individuality really comes about as a result of your ancestors and your descendants, your old age and your youth being hidden from you around the corner of time, right? If you could see yourself as a hyper object, a multidimensional object, you would look like a few ancestors turning into a lot of descendants. It would look like a tree, right? That's the sculpture of the human story in time. It's like branching out. There's a reason that a family tree is such an oft-used analogy. So I just find that really, really interesting, and I can't believe Weinstein either didn't mention it or hasn't made the connection between Plato and what he's saying here. It's absolutely fascinating. Okay, so I think that's all I have to say about dimensionality.
Well, I'm sure that Eric Weinstein's aware of the family tree and whatnot.
But is he aware of our man Plato?
I feel like he must be.
He's got to be. It's one of the most famous names in all of civilization. But I don't know. Well, we're making the connection, even if Dr. Weinstein has been neglectful in making it. The sacred geometry suggests to us that reality is an illusion, right? The reality we live in is all this illusion. It's real. It's a subdomain of a larger reality that we can't access. And so the idea of a fake reality that we're living in, this managed reality, is going to be the theme, as I mentioned earlier, of the last 2 clips here. And we can embark on those whenever you're ready, Brian, unless you've got further comment on sacred geometry.
Well, I think it's understanding the dimensions is going to be practical for trying to escape the solar system.
Yeah. Yes.
Although I just don't know how useful it is for like, negotiating the challenges of human experience, though, which, due to our four-dimensional nature has a lot to do
man.
with
That is a great
the
question.
challenge between good and evil and whatnot, which we just described before.
Yeah, I should have thought of this. That's a great question. I should have thought of it myself. I can't believe I didn't. But well done, man. If the human story, the trajectory of the grand human story, is the shape of it, right? If you could see all the slices of time at once, it would look like a big tree. Well, that suggests that each generational wave, each successive wave of people, right? Mom and dad, babies grow up, babies make more babies. You get this. You get your family tree. Well, then the point of being alive is to shot put those babies as far up the ladder of success and as far forward into the future as you possibly can before your wave washes back down the beach, right? So the idea is to move the human, the thing that benefits the human, the thing that lends the human story its shape is this egolessness, right? This caring for offspring, caring for others, community-minded, connection with others, the connection with others that's so typified by the experience of seeing Michelangelo's David and getting a little look through the keyhole into Michelangelo's mind, right? The breaking down of barriers between people, right? That really it suggests service to others, be that your descendants or other people in your community, as the right way forward in the sense of continuing the shape of the great human story that's borne us aloft this far through history. And conversely, rounding up, like, this is where finance really enters the equation, right? Finance is interesting because it's like a big finance is like a Stargate, right? It's like you go to the bank and take out a mortgage to get a house. They are delivering to you your money from the future, right? The bank has a time machine in the sense of dimension. Realize, Dr. Weinstein is calculus based, and so am I. Realize that you can define the physical world with derivatives of velocity is a derivative of position with respect to time. Acceleration is a derivative of velocity, again with respect to time. And you can take and finance is value with respect to time, right? It's the derivative of time and with respect to value. And so the wrong thing to do, right? The evil thing to do would be like consuming children, if you'll forgive the self-serving simile here, plunging children into student loan debt, right? That's an act of pure evil because you are glorifying the ego of old people at the expense of the young and future generation. It is a violation. It is. It's an abomination is what it is. Consuming children for the sake of the old isn't the opposite of the human, like what it means to be human, right? That's what's evil. And so it's very interesting to me that our friend Epstein has that finance was his his entryway into all of our lives. So when you say good and evil, I do think that transdimensionality or extra dimensionality clearly implies a certain morality, and that calcified egos are the opposite of that, right? Being too concerned with yourself and not being too concerned with one individual wave washing up on the beach and not with the motion of all the waves over all the time is the opposite of what God intends, if I can put it that way.
All right.
Did I answer the question? I feel like I think I got around to it.
Dimensionality certainly provides a new light on the sickness that besets us.
Yeah. Yes. It sure does. That's a good way to put it.
But the people, engaging in this behavior, I feel like I've lost the thread of they're just like compulsively grabbing for more. Rather than like listening to their daemon, or
yes, they've completely ignored their daemon because in their mind their ego has metastasized like a cancer. That's exactly what's happening here, I think that's pretty good. What say we move on to clip number 5, Brian, where we are going to get into Jeffrey Epstein. And I do need to mention here that for those like me who are benighted by ignorance, the word perseverate, it means to repeat over and over again. I had to look that one up because I had to admit Dr. Weinstein had me with his vocabulary. So just in case anyone else is like me, here's the clip.
I desperately want to know why Jeffrey Epstein knew so much about my work. And I want to know why he was connected to my graduate program. I was in the Harvard mathematics department Jeffrey Epstein was absolutely connected to the Harvard math department. I want to know why.
How was he connected to the math department?
You're pushing me to say things I'm not going to say. But I don't mind.
I'm curious. I'm not trying to push you out.
I understand,
Yeah.
but I'm just not going to do it. I'm saying that anybody who wants
But
to
you said he was connected to the math
to
department.
the Harvard mathematics department,
How did you know he was connected?
you can Google it. You could Google it right now. This is not. I can point at all sorts of stuff that's hidden in plain sight.
So I'll take your word for it. And the assertion that I'm picking up on is that Jeffrey Epstein was planted in your world to keep.
I'm not saying he's planted. I don't know who he was. I don't know who ran him. He certainly was not a financier in any standard sense.
Really?
That was a cover story, yes.
The way that we know Jeffrey Epstein, in the UK especially, is just this guy who was this rich guy who had this island, who brought people there and then did these despicable things there.
Disgraced financier Jeffrey Epstein.
Yeah, that's the story.
Disgraced financier Jeffrey Epstein. It's called perseveration. He was a disgraced financier. What kind of a financier? A disgraced one. What was his name? Oh, he was disgraced financier Jeffrey Epstein. They perseverate that into your mind so that you auto-complete that in your LLM life. Do you believe that that's what Jeffrey Epstein was?
You met him.
Yeah. I
Was
can
he
tell
a
that
disgraced financier?
he wasn't a financier the day I met him.
What was he?
He was a weird guy who didn't seem to know a lot about currency trading, claiming to run a multi-billion-dollar FX hedge fund.
When you say a weird guy, what made him weird?
Same stuff I've said on Chris Williams. I'm not going to go back through that. Just my point is you're getting a different interview, right?
Mm-hmm.
So what I'm trying to get at is Jeffrey Epstein knew a tremendous amount about my work when nobody knew anything about my work. And he had a pipeline into me that I didn't understand, which is that he was connected to my graduate program. And you can check out the conference called Exploring Gravity.
And hosted physical workshop called Confronting Gravity
Confronting Gravity, that's right.
in March 2006.
Yeah, what is Jeffrey Epstein? Jeffrey Epstein is very focused on gravity.
Was it a gravity conference?
Yeah.
It was about gravity.
Yeah,
What the fuck was he doing talking about bloody gravity if he's a financier?
it was very important to get Nobel laureates and some of the smartest people on Earth to come to the Virgin Islands and talk about gravity. Stephen Hawking was there, David Gross was there, Lawrence Krauss was there, Lisa Randall was there, right before his conviction. And I'm telling you, he was very focused on the Harvard math department, and he knew all about me in ways that he wasn't supposed to.
Well, that's certainly chilling. Jeffrey Epstein's a construct. How fascinating that Epstein lands right smack dab in the middle in the world of finance. He's like the intersection of finance and like physics. Just the same intersection we've been trying to hammer out here with reference to sacred geometry. It really makes you wonder, like, what is going on here? Like, is it like the opposite of an iceberg where only a little bit is visible at the top and there's a huge, like substructure underneath the water where you can't see it anymore? Is it the case that it's like that in reverse? We can only see from our vantage point, at the bottom of the ocean. We're looking up and seeing like the Donald up there. He seems to be the most powerful man in the world, but like he doesn't seem to be free to do anything differently, except for maybe marginally more, maybe some tax cuts for the rich. But as far as releasing Epstein files or stopping the arming of Ukraine or the arming of Israel, he doesn't seem to have any discretion to change the course of the ship. Like, how many layers above the Donald are there that we're getting this bizarre construct of Jeffrey Epstein dropped into all of our lives, trying to keep an eye on scientists or something, collect political compromise on politicians, using the world of finance to create this whole, using the wealth from finance to create this whole, it's bizarre. Like, we just have no idea what's going on above our heads here. I think that there is a lot that's being occluded from our field of view here. What do you think, Brian?
So, I mean, you think that maybe Epstein is downstream from some kind of, like, I don't know, maybe some kind of, maybe Moloch is like some kind of interdimensional demon or higher dimensional demon or something. And his manifestation has come down to infiltrate our science and prevent our growth.
Let me roll out my pet theory here. Weinstein thinks this is about interstellar travel or nuclear technology. But I'm wondering if the scientists didn't discover that reality really is an illusion. Like we've got the double slit experiment, we've got the placebo effect, and we've got the delayed choice experiment in which starlight, depending on how you measure it here on Earth, starlight either went both, like a wave hits like a dock piling, but then on the other side of that dock piling, the wave is still intact, right? The dock piling just takes a chunk out of the wave, but the wave still propagates past it. Right? So if you measure the starlight from behind a quasar as a wave, you can get it coming from both sides of the quasar or from all around it. But if you measure it as a particle, it has to choose a path to go around. But it should have made that choice hundreds of thousands of years ago, right? So what is going on here? That's a 2016, 2017 MIT paper about that. You can look up on the internet. What is going on here? Did the scientists figure out at some point after World War II that reality is actually some kind of an illusion? I mean, if they did, they could scarcely come out, with their stethoscopes and their white lab coats and hold a press conference and be like, "Well, everyone, good news. Turns out your job is not but an illusion," right? I mean, like it would just be the end of society overnight. It would just like announcing that there's a comet heading towards Earth, like an Armageddon. You can't do that. You'll get mass hysteria, chaos, and panic overnight. So, like, what is going on here?
Well, maybe Epstein or whatever is like just a manifestation of like the darker nature within us has like manifested this thing somehow.
Sent its minion to make sure that people don't find out that reality is an illusion. Is that what you're saying? Or that Epstein himself is some kind of a personification?
Both.
Both. Yeah. Well, I mean, who knows? I mean, anything. When you start thinking about the illusory nature of reality, as suggested by our man Plato, anything is possible. So that's my theory, and so I guess what we could do now is just listen to this last clip from Dr. Weinstein, because we talked about this either last week or the week before, but Robert Maxwell, the old...
hang on. Well, I guess maybe the truth about, they're trying to put out the security footage from Epstein, in jail or whatever, and, it's just nothing, but of course there's like a missing minute, but I don't know, like maybe the truth about Epstein being in jail is something, I don't know, that maybe it just completely defies like understanding.
Yeah, maybe he like created a portal and stepped through it,
right?
And then they can't really show that to everyone, right?
So they have to like find some body, and there are those pictures like of like Epstein's body being coming out, and like the ear like just doesn't match his ear. Is something that's been bandied about on conspiracy circles.
Well, you can imagine that if Dan Bongino and Kash Patel and Pam Bondi and Tulsi Gabbard and the Donald, all right, well, what's on the video? Oh, Epstein is casting a portal and stepping through it. Well, okay, we're just going to have to say he committed suicide. We're just going to have to move on.
Like maybe it's like in Pinocchio, right, where basically like the fox and the cat, they basically meet Satan himself in a bar. And so like if you're like the Donald or something, and it's like, well... It's Satan himself, you see, that is behind the whole thing. And so, yeah.
That's another good theory. By the way, it's great you should bring up Pinocchio, because that movie is about student loan debt too, at least the way it's about adults fooling children and consuming them, right? It's about the abomination, the opposite of the human spirit, right? Because obviously the fox and whatever the two actor guys, they trick Pinocchio into signing up to become a jackass and sign up for forced labor, right? And then because Geppetto, the father, right, didn't fail to protect his child, he's in the belly of this beast that now has to be rescued by his child. It's the Jonah story all over again. This is Dr. Jordan Peterson's analysis, and it's spot on. It's a great bit. So it's interesting. You should bring up Pinocchio. Whew. Okay, so do we want to hear about Mr. Robert Maxwell, the media tycoon and the father to Ghislaine Maxwell, the accomplice of Jeffrey Epstein?
Sure.
Let's hit it.
Not the coffee guy.
Not Maxwell's coffee. You got it, yeah.
I think that his girlfriend's father, Robert Maxwell, was all through scientific publishing. And I think Pergamon Press was, in part, a control mechanism for making sure that revolutionary discoveries were taking place within a framework. Anybody can, look, you can write a Substack article and you can hit post, and suddenly the world has access to your Substack article. That is a nightmare. What if somebody posts weaponized anthrax? What if they do the equivalent of saying, what if there's a neutral proton?
So you think he was controlling science?
I think that Robert Maxwell was in part trying to control science. I think Jeffrey Epstein was in part trying to fund science, trying to control it. I don't really know. Again, part of the problem with why conspiracy theorists have a bad name is that they're not content to live in ignorance. And I am. I know something is really off with this story. If you look at me saying things like, you don't know whether Biden is going to make it to November. Ha, 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 Eric, what an idiot, blah, 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 okay? Then he has a debate. He doesn't make it to November. I'm not Nostradamus. I'm just dumb enough to say something in public that makes sense. Let me say something in public that makes sense. Our national security people suck at their jobs. The people who are in charge of the Department of Energy, which is masking the Department of Physics, which is masking the Department of Nuclear Weapons, right? The Atomic Energy Acts, which are really about atomic weaponry, recast as Atoms for Peace or who knows what. Jeffrey Epstein, who is not a disgraced financier. The newspapers that have always had a national interest component and have liaisons so that they can work with the CIA and the State Department and they do each other's bidding and scratch each other. This whole network is what I've called managed reality. We live in managed reality. We are all in some version of the Truman Show.
Yeah, we are. Some kind of managed reality, and things are not adding up anymore. This is what it's like during every era of economic collapse and turmoil. Reality itself crumbles and collapses because the authorities have everything to do with our conception of reality. And so when everyone starts to take a good hard look at their emperor and see just how naked the man is, reality comes tumbling down. Happened in the Roman Empire with their fall. You get the rise of the bound book in Christianity and the transition from polytheism to monotheism. Happened at the end of the Renaissance. You got people realizing not only that the sun orbits the earth and not vice versa, but you have Filippo Brunelleschi, the man who designed the dome that still crowns Florence to this day, realizing that straight lines converge towards points on the horizon, that people hadn't realized that before, and started incorporating it into artwork. This is a revolution in the reality people think they're living in, and we are long overdue for another paradigm shift. We'd be fools to think that all our paradigm shifts are already behind us and we're now in the clear, right? That would be insane thing. That's the opposite of the lesson history teaches us.
Well, listening to Weinstein there, I'm all in on this idea now that I think whatever the truth is about that prison cell is going to be something that completely defies our understanding of things, and it's if we knew the answer, that would be the paradigm shift, because it's not going to be that he just killed himself in his jail cell, whatever the shocking truth is.
The UFOs in the sky, the lights in the night sky, figure into this too. The government can do nothing but say, we don't really. They don't want to come out and say they got no idea, because then we won't take them seriously as authorities anymore. But they also, so they can't admit the truth. But there's nothing they can really tell us, because it doesn't make sense. Well, I think to put a bow on this whole discussion, Brian, we should bring it around full circle to the notion of Platonic ascent, right? Because Plato theorized that this is the whole point of the allegory of the cave, is that we want the philosopher king to undergo an ascent from the illusion, the cave, out into the divine light that exists outside the cave, right? And this idea of an ascent from a imperfect, temporary realm to a eternal realm of perfection got swept up into Christianity as this idea of dying and going to heaven, right? It's people don't often, I don't know why, but people don't think of Christianity as Greek, but the whole New Testament was written in Greek, right? It's a Greek religion. It's heavily informed by Greek philosophy. The Gospel of John in particular invokes the logos, the Greek idea of the ordering mind of the universe. It imagines God as the Greek logos. There were many branches of Greek philosophy in Plato, of course, living in the 4th century BC, was long gone by the time the Roman Empire collapsed, but by the time 700 years later, in the Nile Delta in Alexandria, the city named for Alexander the Great, you've got all these competing schools of different kinds of Platonic thought. But when the emperors of Rome converted to Christianity, they outlawed all but the Christian version of the Platonic ascent. But other versions continue to live on underground, most notably Hermeticism, named for the Greek god Hermes, also known as the Egyptian god Thoth, also known as the Roman god Mercury, same guy. Hermes, the Hermes Trismegistus, Hermes thrice blessed, is the person who is talking in the Corpus Hermeticum, the books that were, obviously banned by the Christian church, but whom the Medicis of Florence dug up in the Renaissance and started circulating. The Corpus Hermeticum, which says, if you want to know God, you must make yourself like God, for like knows like. That's a heresy to the church. You're not supposed to make yourself like God, right? The Christian church burns people at the stake for that. The idea that the Medici became obsessed with alchemy as a result of this Hermetic text, right? If Hermeticism is the theory, alchemy is the practice. The point of alchemy, and alchemy gave rise to the scientific revolution. Alchemy became chemistry when astrology became astronomy. But the idea behind alchemy is that the experiment that you're performing in your crucible, with your retorts and your whatever it is that you're doing, whatever metallurgical experience, it reveals as much about the observer as it does about objective reality. And the idea that our consciousness gives rise to objective reality, a la the placebo effect of the double slit experiment, is the basis of magic. The idea that if your mind is creating this reality, then reality admits of manipulation by the mind, right? That is the thing that gets you burned at the stake during the Middle Ages. And it is still the thing that gets you burnt at the stake today, because the scientific revolution was co-opted by power, and it promoted this idea that you are a smaller mind moving around inside a grand creation. That's the Christian conception, versus the grand creation being inside your mind, right? It's like, which end is up here? It's a great controversy. And now the placebo effect and the double slit experiment are really lending some credence to the old magical alchemical ideas about what's really going on here. So, that's it. That's the Platonic ascent, right? And that is the way to bring it around back to the beginning. What do you do, with your self-determination, with what, we should be aiming towards a Platonic ascent, an escape from the twin illusions of reality and ego that have us trapped like the walls of a prison. So that, I think, is the big takeaway here. I think reality itself is going to bust open at the seams in the very near future. And all we're going to be able to do is watch in astonishment as our authorities are completely discredited. Anyway, that's what I think.
A bold prediction on the System Failure Podcast.
Yes, indeed. Well, I think that's a good place to leave it, I suppose, for this week. What do you think, Brian?
Sure.
All right, well, then I will invite all of you, our valued and dear listeners, to migrate over to systemfailure.org. There, you can enter in your email address to receive the weekly essays written by yours truly that are about the topics that I try to elucidate in today's podcast. They take the place of history. Each week you'll get about 1,000 words about history, and it will fill in all the cracks about Plato and the rise and fall of Rome and the medieval era and modern capitalism. And if you'd like to get in touch with either Brian or me, why, you can accomplish that at systemfailure.org as well. Simply click on the About page and then select the appropriate name. Alrighty, folks, it has been a pleasure. We hope you have a great week. We'll be back next week and talk to you then.
See ya.